Hi, hello, my name is Lottie, aka Sneezy Ferret, and I'm a few days late doing this video, but it's because of a very good reason. So I've been trying to make a deep dive video into the grooming gang scandal that has been the inquiry, but it's almost impossible, not because there's not enough stuff, but because there's just way too much. To be able to go into one thing, you've got to go into another thing, yeah. So yeah, a mess. So what I'm going to do instead is I believe that it should be covered, and that is the responses that a couple of the victims have made in regards to the mess of the inquiry and a response to the Prime Minister for his crap letter. So if you're unaware of the letter that these victims received after dropping out of the inquiry because they didn't feel like they were being listened to, I'll read it for you now. So the letter from the Prime Minister reads, Dear Fiona, Elizabeth, Jessica and Ellie Ann, I wanted to reach out directly to thank you for being part of the expert panel and supporting us to set up the National Inquiry into grooming gangs. The heinous crimes committed against you and many others by violent and depraved gangs were truly appalling. We know that in some areas these crimes were disproportionately committed by Asian men, and I assure you that the inquiry will look explicitly at that. You were also let down catastrophically by the institutions that should have protected you, and they must be held accountable. We are determined that survivors must be at the heart of this inquiry, and we do not underestimate the bravery you've shown by reliving these ordeals, again and again and again. I mean, bearing in mind that if you're not aware, the first inquiry, which was an inquiry into whether or not they should have an inquiry, took 7 years. So it's not like these girls are rushing for some convictions and for some oversight in all this, all right? They've already had to wait almost a decade in some cases, sometimes over that. I wanted to offer my personal commitment to you in getting this inquiry right. I understand your decision to leave the panel will not have been taken lightly, but the door will always be open should you wish to return. So that was his letter. It's hollow and kind of meaningless. He promised to reach out to all the victims, and he just sent out a bulk letter to them all. So I'm going to first of all start with the statement from Fiona Goddard. This was in regards to her, it's pretty much her resignation letter. So it says, last night, Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding in charge of much of the ongoing inquiry into group-based CSE, released a statement, largely in reaction to my resignation from the Victim Survivor panel yesterday. When I resigned from the panel, I cited serious concerns that myself and other survivors have about 1. The expansion of the inquiry's scope beyond grooming gangs, and 2. Pushes for the inquiry to have a more regional focus and not be truly national, which is something that Baroness Casey, who did the original inquiry, has warned against. She's concerned that some criminals may move from one country to the other, so for example from Scotland to England, to avoid these charges, or to avoid the inquiry, I should say. Jess Phillips has said these suggestions are categorically untrue and this is a lie. Now, I will have some text messages put up alongside, which is the ones that Fiona Goddard is saying back this up, and they do back it up, I'll say that. The first time concerns were raised around expansion of the inquiry's scope beyond the grooming gangs was during a meeting where survivors of all kinds of child sexual exploitation, or CSE, not just grooming gangs, were invited to a meeting with the Mayor of West Yorkshire to discuss the terms of reference for the National Inquiry. In this meeting, both myself and Keighley MP Robbie Moore flagged concerns that whilst every survivor of CSE deserves to be heard, this inquiry is meant to be narrow and purely focused on grooming gangs alone. Yeah, otherwise it waters it down. Later, I was invited to join the Victim Survivors panel to help steer the terms of reference for the inquiry. Again, this panel included many survivors of CSE, not related to grooming gangs. On this panel, it was noteworthy that only survivors who were not impacted by grooming gangs, and those that we knew had close relations to Jess Phillips, were the only people pushing for the scope of the inquiry to be pushed to all kinds of CSE. Shortly after I was added to the panel, I got an email saying we were to be consulted on the terms of reference, and one of the questions on the agenda was, should the inquiry have an explicit focus on grooming gangs or group-based CSEA, or take a broader approach? It is a blatant lie for Jess Phillips to suggest, as she has done in her letter, that it is untrue that there has been the possibility of conversation around expanding the scope beyond grooming gangs. That text message in itself says that they were looking into that, so how can she deny that? That makes no sense. Jess Phillips has also denied that the government has sought to take a regional approach to investigations. This is also a lie. In the meeting with the Mayor of West Yorkshire mentioned earlier, Alison Lowe, the Deputy Mayor, said that she did not want a review anywhere near West Yorkshire, and Bradford is in West Yorkshire. Though she later changed her position, no truly national review would entertain the idea of having areas opt out of the investigation, especially an area like Bradford, which is one of the worst affected and least investigated areas blighted by grooming gangs. Yeah, why on earth would you want that to not happen in your county? Seriously? Surely you want the children in your area to be safe? Perhaps not. It's a good question to ask. It was particularly concerning to see this so actively pushed for by a Labour official. Baroness Casey set out firm recommendations in her audit around both of these issues, group-based CSE and a national overview with an in-depth investigation into localities with high levels of evidence of failings in proportion with the amount of survivors. The government said they accepted the recommendations in full from her audit, and yet both the main things have been questioned. It's no wonder these girls have left. And it's no wonder they feel like they're not being listened to again. They're already let down by social services, police and everything else. And unfortunately now they're not even putting a judge in charge of this inquiry. That's the major issue, it seems, at the moment, is they're refusing to. Now, Keir Starmer has said that it's because Baroness Casey suggested that they shouldn't, but that's not true. Other people have covered that a lot more in depth, but it's not true. She didn't say that at all. You could possibly... There's a few comments that she made that you could possibly take it from, but not very likely. Not at all. I then raised my concerns with Jess Phillips through private text, as did other survivors. Jess replied to survivors stating that she believes the inquiry should just focus on grooming gangs, but that she couldn't decide that without consulting more widely first. Why are there other victims on this panel in the first place? That doesn't mean I think that they don't deserve to be heard, because they do. And if there needs to be an inquiry into that, then so be it. But to bring other victims in means that you're just going to, by broadening the scope of the investigation, you are just going to water it down, meaning that these girls will probably not get any justice at all. And I think they've waited long enough. This is utterly ridiculous. One of the reasons why I'm reading their letters is because I'm not seeing anyone else read them in full, and I think they deserve to be heard. It's only fair. Certain things around the terms of reference certainly need consulting on, but many of the most fundamental aspects, the fact that this would be a national inquiry with mandatory statutory investigations into key areas with a narrow focus on grooming gangs, were already confirmed during the announcement of this inquiry, and their importance was cemented by Baroness Casey. They should have been set in stone. Promising one thing publicly to the nation, then secretly consulting on if they needed changing is wrong. And if these girls hadn't resigned, we would not know about it. It's only the fact that now, and I am concerned about one of the statements being made by a couple of the victims, where they seem to think that speaking aloud about this, there's some intimidation. Now, checking out their Twitter pages, there are a few people who have been harassing them and making all sorts of accusations against them, bearing in mind that a few of these victims have had convictions, meaning that the people who hurt them have been convicted of those crimes, so there is no question. But then, considering that when one earlier survivor, this was, I think a few years ago now, Sammy Woodhouse, she applied for compensation for counselling and that sort of thing. And I'll be honest, I don't care if they get compensation. I think they should. I think they need the counselling. Either way, the government organisation that's supposed to do that said no, because they believed that a 14-year-old consented, or that she was complicit in what happened to her. And that's disgusting. As with the harassment and bullying online, that the vitriol being spat at them is disturbing. It really, really is. With one of them being an ex-police officer and current MP. So much so that I noticed Baroness Foster has stepped in and has been backing them up. This is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. It's disgusting, the fact that people would think it's a good idea to go after victims who've been through so much anyway. But the fact that one of them is an ex-police officer just makes it even more truly disturbing, because these are people who didn't listen to the victims in the first place, who just completely ignored them. As a grooming gang survivor, I've been accused of lying by public institutes for years, in an attempt to cover up and deny the abuse of myself and thousands of others. For the minister in charge of safeguarding to come out against me and accuse me of lying is an absolute betrayal of myself and all survivors. I'm surprised that Phillips would say this when she knows for a fact there have been extended conversations about the inquiry's scope and regional focuses. I had let myself hope that maybe this time would be different, that these officials might actually tell the truth. I won't be making that mistake again, and I can hardly blame her. I will put this up alongside, but I'm going to read it out. So this is the comments made by Alison Lowe. She was the one who said that we don't want it in our area. She said, "You might not accept that, but my narrative was that there have been many views, 74 or less, you decide, and that the work that we were doing in West Yorkshire collectively and the voices that I had heard, the voices of survivors and victims, was that I do not want a review anywhere in West Yorkshire, and Bradford is obviously in West Yorkshire." Why would you not want this in your area? I'm going to ask that question again because I think it's important. These people, I hate the fact that they're human beings because their behaviour is just evil. And I hate the fact that there's only so many synonyms that I can use for disgusting and disturbing. All right, let's move on to the statement made by Ellie Reynolds in regards to their letter that she received from the Prime Minister. It says, "Dear Prime Minister, if your reason for writing to me was to make me feel better, it did the complete opposite. In your letter, you thank me for being an expert on the expert panel and for supporting the national inquiry into grooming gangs, but you don't thank me for telling the truth. The truth that exposed how your government used, manipulated and abused me and others in this process, and that's exactly why you're writing to me now, and they still are. They're just abusing them more so by refusing to let this inquiry go ahead with being judge-led and actually just focusing on the grooming gang victims. It's weird. Let's say weird for now. You say there were heinous crimes committed by Asian men. You know that's not right. Years of court cases and witness statements have shown the overrepresentation of Pakistani men in these rape gangs. Even Baroness Casey has spoken clearly of Pakistani men, yet here you are still hiding behind the word Asian. Why can't you say it? How can anyone believe a word you say when you won't even say these two words? You wrote that we were let down badly by institutions, but institutions didn't fail us, Prime Minister, people did. Police officers ignored us, social workers dismissed us, councillors and MPs looked the other way while we were being abused. And when the truth began to emerge, politicians hid it for fear of maintaining community relations. Even you, knowing the truth, described investigating what happened to us as a far-right bandwagon. Why did you do that, Prime Minister? To use the fear of being called racist as a weapon to suppress the truth? It's because of votes, and because he was the prosecutor in charge, at the time that this took place. I shouldn't be making this video while still ill because my brain's not working very well, but I think it's important to do it, and I've put it off long enough. You end your letter by saying the door will always be open should you wish to return. Return to what, Prime Minister? To a process that lied about us? To a panel stacked with people recruited to hide the truth? Work with people exposed for wanting to hide the racial motivation of our abusers? Or to a system that tried to present a former police officer or social worker, the very professions that failed us as independent leaders of an inquiry? If we hadn't spoken out, if we hadn't resigned, what would have happened? One of those people would have been put in charge of investigating institutions responsible for our abuse. That was your government's idea of independence. And what happened when we told the truth? Well, your safeguarding minister accused us of lying. You promise you'll get this inquiry right, but you won't admit how catastrophically you've already got it wrong. Your own safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips, was caught lying about us, and you still say nothing. You won't sack her, you won't make her apologise. Worst of all, you won't even mention it, as if she never said what she said. That silence says more than any promise you make. Yep, actions speak much louder than words. And you lied. You said a judge was stopped from leading the inquiry because Baroness Casey recommended it. She never said that, did she, Prime Minister? And if you read through the transcripts, no, she didn't. She didn't say that at all. Or the outcome of the inquiry, she didn't say that in there either. You said, the truth is your government tried to fix the process, got caught, and now you're trying to rewrite what happened through polite letters. You wrote to look caring and in control, instead you exposed yourself even further. You refused responsibility, refused to apologise, and still refused to admit the truth. Instead of thanking me, Prime Minister, you should have apologised to the survivors, to their families, and to everyone betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them. Until that happens, your inquiry will remain what it always has been, a continuation of the cover-up. You said the door will always be open for me to return. Well, the door is open for you to tell the truth, to admit the cover-up, and to apologise to every child failed by your deceit, your lies, and your cowardice. Yours sincerely, Ellie Reynolds. Both letters are extremely powerful and tell us an awful lot more than what is being reported on. I'm a little dismayed that I'm not seeing these letters reported in mainstream media. Again, these girls, their words, their voices haven't been heard for years. It's about time they were. And the fact that we cannot rely on an inquiry to do that, we must. Look, I said in my welcome to the channel video, and I meant it, that one of the things that I truly believe is that As members of a society, those who with the ability to speak out should, because we have a responsibility and obligation to look after those who are vulnerable, and that does include children. Children are our most vulnerable and yet our best asset. But we are treating them like they're expendable, or at least our governments are, and our institutions are. The fact that this was able to go on for so long and is still happening, because it hasn't stopped, just because there are inquiries, just because it's being talked about in the news, it doesn't mean that it's stopped and it's no longer happening. There are new victims every day. And the more we don't deal with the problems causing it, the longer it will go on for. It's already a massive scandal, but it's not being treated like the massive scandal it is. It's sidebar news. A few places are taking it a bit more seriously, but not as seriously as they should be. Just because these girls are now adults, it doesn't make them any less victims. Because I think that's half of our problem. When we look at a news story and we see the pictures of these children being hurt, it's a lot easier for us to want to fight for them. But when they're adults, people stop caring as much. It's a sad fact, but I do believe that it's true. I've said before that I have a bit of a dog in this fight, as I know someone who's very, very close to me who was involved with this. Not one of the major ones going on, but one of the minor ones that no one's really talked about. I can't go into too many details because they've asked for anonymity and it wouldn't be fair to expose them like that. I'm just angry, really, really angry that it's still going on and that nothing is happening. All we're hearing about is one disaster after another of these girls not being listened to. Do we really not care about them? Do we really not care enough to just lift their voices up a little? I'm furious. I really am, but I'm also tired. Like I said, I've been trying to work on a deep dive, and it's almost impossible because I either get upset and cry, or I get too angry to speak. And I'm usually very good at finding the words, but I can't. The fact that these sick and twisted individuals seem to seek out power or positions of power, meaning that they can silence their victims' voices, is just... it's like a bad dream. It's like a nightmare. And unfortunately, that does mean that I don't think this inquiry is going to go anywhere. Too many people are invested in keeping this quiet and keeping those victims silent. The one thing I will say in regards to some of the comments that I've seen online directed at the victims, if these girls were just interested in compensation, trust me, they would have been an easier fix to remain silent. I am sure that government institutions who wanted this to remain quiet would have paid them off by now. It's not about the money. It's just not. Again, if it were, they would have been silenced years ago. It's about honesty, a culpability, people actually going to prison for their crimes, and accountability. I want to see that for them too. I don't want these creeps on our streets. Every single person who is a parent in the UK or even thinking about having children should really, really consider how they are going to keep their children safe in regards to this. Some of these girls were those who were considered the forgotten children, or they were the hidden children. Some of them did come from bad backgrounds and everything else, and so were deemed by their abusers to be less than. And that in itself just makes it worse. It really does. A lot of these kids didn't have good family lives, so they had nobody to turn to whilst this was going on. And yeah, again, it's continuing. I'm going to end the video here because, people are starting to make noise around my house and it's almost impossible to make the videos like that. So yeah, I love you all very much. Please take care. Please look into this and keep this going. We can't let this just stop. We can't. Anyway, yes, take care and I shall see you on the next video. Mwah. Love you all. Bye-bye.